We're recording this session. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Children's Scholarship Fund Baltimore's program on high school choice. We are so excited to resurrect this program that we did for several years prior to COVID. And we hope present this information that will really help, especially our 7th and 8th grade families, make decisions about where their student is going to high school. A lot of people, first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Beth Harbinson. I'm the Executive Director with Children's Scholarship Fund Baltimore. And one of the things that people think about school choice is they sometimes think that we are a pro-private school organization. And we aren't. We're an organization that believes that a parent knows what's best for their child in terms of making a selection of a school. And then as our young people get into middle school and certainly high school, we know that students also have a big voice in the choice that they make about where they go to school. And there are so many factors that go into making the best choice for you and your family and your student about where you're going to go to high school. So we have some experts on our board of trustees who have so kindly come this evening to share their experience with us about that choice process and about empowering you to make that choice a reality for your student. I'd like to introduce a few folks before we get started, and then we'll just launch into the program. So my right-hand person, my partner in crime, sometimes we refer to each other as each other's spouse, work spouses, is on, and Joanne Sanders is her name, and we are so excited that she is here tonight. She mentors and supports many of our families through our K-8 process, and we know many of them making their high school decisions as well. I'd also like to thank our trustees, Ann Mickle and Gabby Calderon, for being here tonight. They're part of our committee that is supporting this program and has helped us put this together. And now to introduce I'll introduce our former trustee, Jamila Sams, who is the founder of Go Ask Miss Sams. And I love how the name of her consulting practice came about, because when she served as a high school principal, frequently everyone in the school, I'm told, would say, oh, just go ask Miss Sams. So as the resident expert on many things, we're delighted that she's joining us, and she's going to talk and focus primarily on those of you who are coming from a private school with the Children's Scholarship Fund Baltimore program into a public school environment, which is a change. And then we also have our current trustee, Valerie Grays, who is the Student Life Advisor in the Office of Student Life and Engagement at Baltimore Community College, and has been a trustee and is a CSFB parent who brings a wealth of knowledge about that, about the private school to private school transition. So frequently our students, when they're in 8th grade, who are going to a private school, are transitioning into a different school. They're not staying in the same school where they were K-8. And so there's a decision-making process that goes on about what private school they should go to if they're continuing on that track. And I'd also like to introduce our most important members of the program tonight, in my opinion, our students. And I'll start to my right with Hope Sanders, who was at Patterson Park Charter School. She's rocking the blue hair tonight, and also her current high school building and shirt. She is a sophomore at Baltimore City College. So Hope, thank you so much for being here tonight. And Varia Alston, who is a former CSFB scholar from Cardinal Sheehan and is at Baltimore Polytechnic in her senior year this year, correct? Wow.
Yes.
Thank you. And finally, Kirby Gaddy, who has dropped off, but hopefully will be back on. Oh no, she's there. She's there. I'm playing Hollywood Squares. Kirby has been helping us with this seminar for several years and is currently serving at University of Maryland, Baltimore as the Assistant Director of Annual and Leadership Giving, and brings to the panel some experience and conversation that she'll share with us around financial aid. We're certainly going to save time for questions and answers after the presentation. So please make sure to stay on and ask those questions. And if you'd rather not ask those questions out loud, please put them in the chat. I'm going to mute myself and share my screen, and we're going to turn the program over to Valerie, who's going to start and talk us through the process of those of you who are going to be looking primarily at private schools for your students. So Valerie, take it away.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here. And I want to add that Kirby is also a private school student from K through 12, through college, through grad school. So she has a wealth of information on that scale too. So just wanted to put that out there. As Beth mentioned, I am on the board of CSFB, but I am also a former parent of a scholar with several of my all of my children being scholars with the Children's Scholarship Fund program. So I'm excited to be here and come from experience as a parent and as an educator. So what I'm going to present to you today is just information that I have found in my processes of having students go from private school to being accepted at private schools as well for high school. So yes, I am ready. If you would put up the slides for me, please. The first thing that we're going to talk about is when you're thinking about going from a private school to another private school, you have to ask the reason why. So the next slide, please. Why are you choosing a private school? Are you attending a private school and you want to continue as your family? If that's a goal for your family, a family tradition? You're going because you feel like your child has special needs and a private school would be better. You may not be satisfied with your public school. So the private school option looks better to you. But no matter what the reasons, you are choosing a school that is very important. The decision is very, very important. So we're going to figure out how to do that when you're going the private school route. Next slide. So what types of private schools do we have? We have those that you will find in the religious area, such as Catholic school, Christian school, Islamic, Jewish, and Jewish schools. Or you may have a specialty school, such as the same gender, a boarding school, an online school, college prep, trade, or military. So when you're thinking about private schools, you got to think about which type of school do you want to send your child to, and then find out information about them. So these are the main categories that you'll find with private schools. Next slide, please. So a simple process to help evaluate and choose from private schools is the first thing is to identify your needs. And the important thing is to include your child. A lot of times we want to make decisions about schools that we think are best, but we have not consulted with our child because after all, they are the one that's going to be at this school for 4 years, not you. So we need to include them in the process as much as possible. So the next slide, if you can just do that for me, please. Thank you. If you really think about it, there's a private school for virtually everyone's need and for every budget. And the thing that we want to think about is that private schools, you don't compare them the same. You know, that's like comparing apples and oranges because each private school has its own, its own identity that's different from the next. So when we're doing private schools, we got to look at a few different things about how we're choosing them because they're not all the same. Next slide, please. So what are your requirements? Everyone has varied or different requirements. You should define every requirement on the basis of practical, desired, and extracurricular elements. This process will help you in making informed decisions. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break down each of those particular areas a little bit more. So we're going to first talk about the practical, then desired, and then extracurricular. Next slide, please. Practical requirements. Practical requirements are those that you cannot budge from. These needs must be met. No matter how wonderful a private school may be in other aspects, if it cannot meet your practical requirements, then you must rule that school off of your list as a possibility. Next slide. So what are those practical elements of your private school? When you start to weigh your options, you'll come across several practical constraints. For example, how far must the child travel back and forth to school? You know, you have to think about those things. It's a wonderful school, but if your child can't get there, it's not going to work. Will there be a need for transportation, or does the school provide transportation? If the school is too far for a daily commute, does it provide boarding? And on that note, are you looking for a boarding school? All of that must be considered when you're talking about transportation, boarding, and different things like that. Is there a need for before and after school care? Because many of us are working parents. And so you may not get off at 3:30 or 3:20 when they're getting off. And so does that school have the daycare or aftercare programs that you may need? Are there siblings benefits? One of the great things that Children's Scholarship Fund Baltimore has is that it has a wonderful.
The other person has call captions enabled. Please start speaking.
Okay. One of the things about Children's Scholarship Fund Baltimore is that it has the siblings benefit. So when you have one sibling go and get a scholarship or is a scholarship recipient, then the sibling has the ability to have that too. We need to find out, are those kind of things in place for the private school? Because that may help you make a decision that I can do this now because it's going to benefit me in the long run for a sibling or siblings down the line. Does your child have a physical, emotional, or some type of learning need that requires special attention? Does the school have the ability to meet those needs? Those are very, very important. What about costs? How much? And what about the hidden costs? Because a lot of times we think about just the tuition, but then there are sometimes activity fees, materials and supplies, sports, all kinds of other type of events that may happen that may require the parent to put up more money. So if you're looking like, I can just make it with this tuition, but you got to think about those other hidden costs as well. And the other thing is, do you have certain components in place at a private school before you'll consider it? For example, are you looking for a military school? Do you want religion to be a part of your child's education? Do you want a school where boys and girls are kept separate? These are your values and things that are important to you. And so these are things that you have to ask to make sure that those things are being addressed in your in the requirements that you're looking for. Next slide, please. The next type of requirement or thing that you should look for is your desired requirements. So we've done the practical. Now we got to look at the desired. So desired requirements are those that you're really focusing on while looking at school. It's important that you keep these requirements front and center so that you don't get swayed by other aspects of the private school. And after you've ruled out any practical requirements, this is really how you'll decide which schools are in your short list. Next slide, please. So what are those desired requirements of your private school? Is it a college prep school? Is college preparation a priority? Nope, go back. one more. There you go. Some parents look for science curriculum, engineering, or arts programs. Does that school have those particular interests or specific areas that you're looking for? Or is the school a modern facility? Sometimes that's important. You know, we have a lot of old schools that has a, old charm, but is that what you're looking for? Or are you looking more for a modern facility? I know when I went to college, I chose, and it is true, I looked at where, how modern my school was in the University of North Carolina system, and it was the youngest school and the most modern, and I liked it. So those are real things that people consider when choosing a school. Does your child need a small environment, or is a large school okay? Do you want a school with several grade levels, such as K through 12, where your child will stay in the same school all 12 years? Or are you looking for that separation as most schools have until, from 9th through 12th? And then consider the instructional model. Do you want a traditional back to basics program or an alternative approach to learning? So you have to dig deep on what type of learning you want your child to have. What is the school's culture? How do you feel when you walk into that school? What does the school's technologies, resources look like? Are they up to date? Or are they lacking in some particular areas? Now, some people or some parents are okay with that because they may have an alternative type of learning that they want their child to have. So technology may not be important, but then it may be another parent that technology is very high on their list. Do you want a school where parents are expected to be involved with activities and decisions? And if that's a requirement, would you be able to do that? Because if you're a working parent that works, say, a late shift, you need that daycare, and then you're not going to be able to attend some of those activities. Is that looked upon negatively? So you need to know, what is the parent expectation when you're going there? How does the school communicate with the parents? Do they communicate, weekly, only when there's a problem? How do they communicate with you? And how is it email? Can I talk to a teacher by calling them? All those little things you'll need to know. And after you answer these questions, make sure you prioritize your desired elements. For example, if academic achievement is more important to you than an instructional model, make sure you note that. And after you've considered what is important to you in a school, then you'll need to survey your private school list and find out which schools offer what you want. And then you should be able to grade the schools in a weighted survey, or basically in a way that is important to you and your desired elements. So basically you are cutting down your list. So you've gotten the practical. So those things, if they meet all your practical needs, that's the first thing. So you have that list. And then from that list, what are the desired elements that you're looking for? And then if they meet those needs, then then this list is now created. Next slide, please. Then extracurricular activities. Extracurricular activities or requirements are those nice to have aspects that probably will be more important to your child than to you. They'll help your child decide between two schools that made it through your practical requirements filter and have otherwise equal academic programs. So it's kind of like when you have those two things these two schools that are neck and neck, what is that extra that will get one over the hump or will make one rise to the top over the other? Next slide, please. So what are those extracurricular elements that you would like to consider? After you've worked out your practical requirements, like I said, and consider your desired requirements, it's time to put the icing on the cake. These requirements are what you'll use to pick over 2 equally stellar programs. And don't consider extracurricular requirements without your child. Back to that child, make sure that they are there. For example, which music program, or if there's a music or arts program, is important to you? Do they have an art program? It's, if your student is an art student and you're trying to send them to a program or to a school that doesn't have an art program, that's not going to work too well. If you're a student, your student likes sports and you send them to an arts program and they don't have sports, that's not going to work too well. So what items are important to your child that is not academic? What clubs and organizations do they have? Do they have the ability to create clubs if there's not a club there? So those are the type of things and type of questions you need to be asking when you get down to your short list to see which will be a little bit higher in your selection process on wanting to apply. Next slide, please. So the next thing you need to do is, after you've gotten your list of schools, you need to survey your school. So the first thing, now that you've worked it out, what you're going to be looking for in a school. So for every aspect that is important to you, make sure you get all of your facts and numbers about each school on your list. Read the underlying philosophy of the school, ask about their beliefs that guide their school programs and their teaching approaches. Check the services available at the school, such as counselors, an on-site nurse, librarian, and secretary. And that's really important because a lot of schools with funding being cut sometimes, the nurses and the librarians are sometimes the first to go with programs. And so we want to make sure that if you have a school that you have those things on campus. Sometimes you don't have a full-time nurse. You may have a part-time nurse, a nurse that's there only 2 days a week. Those are kind of questions that you need to ask so that you'll know what you're expecting when you attend that school.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I actually just spoke to a parent a week ago, and she's looking at choice schools for her child. They literally had a deposit down at a school where they were going to send this child, and found out the school didn't have a nurse. And that particular child took a medication that was a controlled medication that because of his age, he wasn't able to administer on his own. So they had to totally exclude that school from their list, going back to the start of your practical requirements. And I was shocked, but that was really eye-opening for me.
Yeah, yep. The next thing we should do is also look at the structure of the school. Is it a year-round school or more traditional, or have a more traditional calendar? Because some schools offer school year-round, and that's good for some. That if that's what you're looking for, that's a good thing. Or are you looking for, I need my summers off because my kids, we're going to go on vacation, or they need a break and they need to work. So look at that kind of thing. What is the background and qualification of the teachers? Teachers are going to be very, very, or they are very important to our students. So how do we get qualified, or how do they get qualified teachers for the programs that they're offering, for the classes that they're teaching? Examine the school's discipline policy to see if the rules seem fair and the consequences seem appropriate. A lot of time you get that little book and they'll send it home. These are our policies and procedures. And a lot of parents just sign it and send it back just to say that they've signed it. But I was a parent that read it. So because I wanted to make sure I understood that if I had an issue with something that I could address it. But if you don't read it and you don't know the policy, then that's a problem. But so looking at those policies, are they fair? Those are the kind of things you need to make sure that you're looking at when you're narrowing down those particular schools. Look at the school's curriculum, find out the homework policies and grading policies. I know a lot of times there are changes. With my children being in public schools, the policies has changed over the years from this percentage is being, you know, assessment is this percentage as opposed to this another percentage, where in the beginning it wasn't. So things changed. But looking at those policies when you're coming in, how are they grading? Do you think that's a fair policy in how you grade? Is homework expected every night in every grade, or does the teacher decide that? Those are kind of things that you got to look at, just to see if that is something that you're okay with. You may be a parent that's like, I need my child to have homework every night, and that's just it. And if they don't do it, then they're not being educated. And then you may have another parent that's like, you know what, I'm okay with homework Monday through Friday, but don't give my child homework on the weekends. So does that line up with the school's policy on homework and grading? Does it line up with yours? The other thing is, find out about the facility in case of an emergency. How are parents notified in case of that emergency? What is the school's policy on guns, knives, and other hazardous items towards bullying, etc.? And unfortunately, this has just, in our reality was too close to home recently, about guns and violence in the classroom. What are the policies for that particular school if something should happen, unfortunately, should happen? What are those policies? What do I expect to happen? How will I be notified? All of those kind of things. Are there schools, some schools, have metal detectors? Is that something that you want? There are some people that don't want security officers to have firearms, So what kind of policy is in place at that particular schools, and does it, meet or gel with your values? The other thing, does the school have any special programs and policy related to parent involvement? Am I required to be at this particular meeting? Do I have to come to 3 activities a year? What are my expectations? What type of relationship does the school have with the local businesses in the community? Do they get guest speakers? Are there financial supporters, to help maybe defray some of the costs that, students have to put up? Is there some type of connection and community involvement? This relationship can contribute to the quality of the school and support that it enjoys in the community. And then another thing, is the school accredited? Public schools have particular accreditations that they must have. Private schools are different. So they're not often. So look at that type of accreditation that they have and who's providing it. Next slide, please. The last step, or the third step, is to visit the school. So you have all of this information, you have your list. Now you need to go and see it, because no matter how you have a written test or what you've seen on paper can compare to you going to the school. I know some of us probably have had particular schools that we wanted to go to college, and then it sounded great. And then when you got on that campus, it just wasn't right. So that's the same thing that happens when you're going to a high school or a private school, high school. Those things happen. What is the ambiance of the school? How do the adults interact with children? A lot of times you can see what's going on how the children, do they seem happy there? Are they rigid and not talking and look scared? What is that whole feeling that you get and what you see when you, come to that school? Also, do you see pictures and happiness on the wall? How is that? Is it clean? Is the facility clean? Is the staff friendly and happy? Or is it Miss Jones at the counter that's not looking at you, but just saying, okay, hey, they'll be right with you? Are you greeted friendly? You know, those things right there, because, you know, customer service and, you know, that first impression is really, really important. And if you don't feel as an adult coming in feeling, you know, valued and important, then how is your child who's some, you know, that may not be able to speak up for themselves? How are they going to feel? So those are different things that you need to think about. Let me see if I had hit all of mine. I think I did on that one. Okay, next slide. And consider the following when visiting a school. We said, look at the facilities to see if it's clean. The basic features which a school must include: well-equipped library. You know, that's important. Do you have a library with updated books? You know, how old are the books? Are they new, old, borrowed, whatever? How are those library books? How is that? How are the resources that you have there? The auditorium, is it large enough for the school? Are there other meetings, you know, places for the students? Or is everything you think will take place in the classroom and they don't have facilities that's big enough for them to do other things? And how often are textbooks and classroom materials reviewed and updated? That's very, very important. You know, we can't have our kids growing and being competitive with others if they don't have the proper materials and supplies. And so that is very, very important. We talked about the homework policy and the discipline policy a little bit earlier. What about the school's extracurricular activities? Does the school have a student council and the club and special clubs and interests? Some of our students from middle school were very active and took their student government association responsibilities or club responsibilities seriously and want to continue that. So does your school or this school have the ability to have them involved in clubs and SGA? So those things are important. How many applicants are typically received for open seats? You know, if I'm going in and I'm thinking I'm a really good applicant, but there are only five seats available in this particular year, that's not good. I need to know what my odds are, you know? What are my odds in getting into this school? How do they select? You know, what are the criteria that they're selecting the students? What's the percentage of applicants pool are offered in enrollment? The higher the ratio, the more competitive enrollment will be at that school. This should help you decide how many schools you will need to apply to in order to get a spot for your child in the upcoming year. And what selection criteria do they use? To which colleges were last year's graduates accepted? That's important because if you have a school, you're paying money for your child to go to this particular school. So you want them to be educated so that the next step is for them to get into a college. So what is that rate? What is that percentage of those that enter in the 9th grade that go on and first those that actually graduate, and then of those that graduate, the percentage of those that actually go on to college? And what are those colleges? What colleges are they going to? So the other thing is, the last thing I want to say is about the faculty and staff turnover rate. You know, 10 to 20% turnover rate will occur or is normal. But if you have a 40% or higher turnover rate of your faculty and staff, that means there's something or indication that there's something may be wrong. So look at those kind of things. So you are really digging in and following or finding out about these schools when you're doing your research. Next slide, please. And the last couple of things are, do the school have a particular academic focus, such as the science or the humanities? I think I mentioned earlier about engineering, arts. So those are the same. same kind of questions you want to ask for different particular area. Does the school have any school to work
Whose
programs?
uniforms on the ground there?
Excuse me? Oh, someone. Does the school have any school to work programs or specialized academics? I know some, there's a particular private school that does have one, and that's important for some parents because these students actually go to work as a part of their program. Also, how much does the school emphasize college preparedness? Is this a school that has AP courses? Does the school have SAT or PSAT prep classes? Does the school offer a dual enrollment program with the local community college? Are they supportive of that? Those are different things of that nature that you need to ask as well. And what percentages take the SAT and what are their average SAT scores? I know this particular year and last year, a lot of schools did not require SAT scores, but we don't know if that's going to continue next year. So you want your students to be prepared and do the best that they can as long as they're required. And so are these schools preparing them for those particular tests? And the last thing I wanted to say is with this part, while on campus, you may have an interview with administration and teachers. And if your campus visits does not include an admissions interview, make sure you set up a primary or preliminary interview with interview for your sake. I wrote too small. Preliminary interview for your sake so that you can. So basically, set up an interview if possible with some administration individuals when you do come on the campus or the school grounds to figure out or to find out more about the individual school. So, and then if you have any other questions, write them down while you're there, because if someone can't answer the questions, write them down and then reach back out to someone who can. So just follow up, because any question that you have is important, because you are, again, finding a place for your child to be educated for the next 3 to 4 years. So those things are important. Next slide, please. And then the last thing is, after you've gotten all this information, you're going to have to make a decision. So after visiting the school, filter out any schools that didn't meet your practical requirements. You should have or should be left with a short list of schools which you have researched. Careful research should have ranked these schools at which point you want to look at the extracurricular activities, as well as that scheduled campus visit. And now you should prioritize the schools that you want your child to attend and make sure that child is there. Remember that. And then apply to as many as you feel you need in order to satisfy your child to get into at least one school. It's okay to apply to several schools, because you may have that dream school, but if they don't have enough spaces or available seats and you don't make it, then you're left out, not having anywhere to go. And I do know some parents that did that. I have some parent friends that they only wanted to go to private school. They didn't apply during the normal process for public schools, and then they didn't get into those schools that they wanted. And then there was a problem trying to scramble to find out where their child was going to go. So it is better to apply to those schools that you feel that meet your requirements. It's, a couple of those, and then have a backup if you are, considering private only, but it is also good to have a public school as a backup as well. As they tell us with college, with your safe school, your reach schools, it's the same thing with private schools when you're trying to make a decision. And next slide, my last slide, please. So the last thing, these are some resources that I use to get information. I'm sorry, it's kind of small. I can provide those in the chat. Okay, thank you, Beth. So some of the resources that I used, there is also a link on there for looking at where some private schools are ranked. And like I said earlier, it's kind of comparing apples and oranges, but there are some rankings that they do for private schools based on certain criteria. So I did include that you can look at as well. And then making sure you just follow the application processes for each school as they have outlined and meeting their deadline. Because the main thing you have to remember, there are a lot of people applying for schools. And the quickest way to get eliminated is not to meet the deadline of an application process. So make sure that you do that, and you should be good and ask those questions. And thank you so much. I'm sorry I kind of got a little tongue-tied sometime in there, but thank you for listening. And if there are any questions, I will be more than happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Valerie. I think if you have questions, put them in the chat. I think we're going to roll on to Jamila and her presentation. And Jamila, you can let me know if you want me to go ahead and share the screen or if you would like to do that yourself.
I wanted to find out if it was okay for them to ask Valerie the questions they needed, just if it's like fresh in their mind about private school before we get a lot of information about public school.
Awesome. Let's do that. Let's open it up to questions. Any questions? Feel free to take yourself on mute and ask them, or write them in the chat if you would like, and I'll make sure Valerie gets them.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes, Jennifer.
If my child attends private school now, but I was interested in them going to a public school, I know that this week a lot of kids got their composite scores, and the private schools don't hold that testing. How would I go about getting them to take the test for their composite score?
Perfect question. And Miss Jamila is going to talk about that. So she will be able to answer that because she's going to do from private to public school.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Are there any other questions for Valerie regarding if you're going into private school for high school? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, just a thumbs up if you can see it. All right, awesome. So good evening, everyone. So glad that you all took the time out in order to learn about your options, right? It's always great to be in a position where you have multiple options, but that research piece is extremely important in investigating your options for high school for your child. So we all know that that's just one more step away from post-secondary opportunities, whether it be college or other avenues. So that research is extremely important. And so a lot of things that Valerie spoke about for the questions that need to be asked of private schools, please ask those same exact questions of public school. And so I'm not going to go through all of the questions, but I guarantee you every single one that she suggested that you ask, I encourage you to ask of public schools. So when thinking about the high school experience that you're looking for, again, the same thing applies. I think it's really important that young people think about what do they aspire to be or what do they aspire to do. And a lot of times that starts with what brings you joy and what are you passionate about right now. And exposure is so important for you to kind of discover what are the things that you're really interested in. Because I think the adults on this Zoom tonight will really testify that, you know, there's some people that wake up every single morning and they're excited because they have a career that they love. And then other people that kick and scream to get out of bed because they're not doing something that is really grounded in their purpose. And when you're grounded in your purpose, you will have such a fulfilled life. So it's really important to start thinking about, even if you don't know exactly what you want to do, what are those things that bring you joy? And that's extremely important. So some of those things may be art related. Some of those things may be related to science, technology, engineering, or math. Some of those things may be related to health. Some of those things may be related to social sciences. You want to help other people. You want to be a social worker. You want to be a counselor. So really think about what means something to you. And I encourage the parents on this call today to really have those conversations with your child, because as we all know, college is expensive. So you don't want to spend a lot of money in a place where they do not have what you need or what your child needs in order to thrive. So some other considerations that you need to make are location. How far are you going to travel? Is it located in the area that is, that you consider to be safe, or do you feel comfortable leaving your child in that particular area? Size, a lot of the schools, again, in making that change from private school to public school, there are a lot of great changes, and sometimes there are some not so great changes, and size may be one of them. So you may be used to a certain small class size, whereas a lot of the public schools do not have that level of resources, and so they may have larger class sizes. But it really depends on what track your child is going to be in. And then last but not least, just the demographics. What do those demographics look like in terms of like who is in the school, what type of teachers do they have, what are the teachers' qualifications? All of those things really matter. So really think about, if you had to think about or visualize what your high school experience would look like, what do you see? And not just the fun part, but really think about what is it that you want to learn and what is it that you want to get out of that high school experience. So within Baltimore City schools, there are 4 different types of schools that you can select. The first one are the ones that we're probably the most familiar with. These are your criteria schools. These schools require what's called a composite score. And in the past, the composite score, we'll talk a little bit more about composite scores, but they were typically comprised of your entire 7th grade year report card average for ELA, which is basically English, math, science, and I believe social studies. And then it also considered your attendance rate. In addition to your 7th grade average, it also looked at your 1st quarter 8th grade average and your attendance rate. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a few, because things have changed due to the pandemic. But just to let you know, there are several schools that require what's called a composite score in order for students to get into these schools. The first one is Polytechnic, which is really focused on STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math. They have the highest score. So all of these schools, you need to have a 610 to qualify. And I always like to tell you that 610 will allow you to get into the party. But if you go into the VIP section, that's where Poly, City, Western, Dunbar, and Bard sit. Okay, you can get into the party, but you may not be able to get into the VIP section, right? So in order to get into those sections or those schools, you need to have a very high composite score. So 610 qualifies you, but it will not get you in. So based on the past couple of years, these are the average numbers for those schools. So for Poly, you're looking at least a 773 or higher. For City, you're looking at about a 743. Western is 705 and higher. Dunbar is the same. Dunbar also has a P-Tech program, which is a technology program that really focuses on things such as cybersecurity and things of that nature. That is a 700, about a 700 and higher. And then Bard is a school that focuses on early credits. So you would actually graduate from Bard with a associate's degree once you leave Bard, and they also have certain requirements that you need to meet. So it's really important to kind of look at what your grades look like. Unfortunately, there were no, in addition to your grades in the past, they will look at your standardized test scores for that particular year. Because of the pandemic, they've waived that. So you're really just going off of your class grades in all of those different subjects. And I also believe they waived attendance as well. Again, due to the pandemic, there's really no way to accurately track attendance at this time. So you're really just going off of your grades. And because you're going from private school to potentially public school, you want to make sure that you meet with your private school guidance counselor for them to make sure that they have a number attached to your grade. So I think at this point, most schools, there's not just a letter-based system, A, B, C, D, F. Most schools actually have a GPA scale, and they're able to quantify what your score is in every single subject area. So the second type of school is also kind of a criteria type of school. And those are your art schools in Baltimore. So the most famous one is the Baltimore School for the Arts. That's where Jada Pinkett went, and Tupac Shakur, and so many others, Christian Siriano. So you name it, a lot of them went to Baltimore School for the Arts. In order to be accepted to the Baltimore School for the Arts, you would have had to have an audition or a portfolio review. So unfortunately, unless you've already gone through that process, the process for the School for the Arts at this time is over. They start pretty early. And so if you have younger children that you're interested in that process, I highly recommend that you make sure they get as many resources as possible in order for them to build up their portfolio. And they also have what's called the Twigs program that is free for families that qualify, and you would get some additional support and resources. And that Twigs doesn't guarantee that you'll be accepted to the School for the Arts, but it definitely gives you a greater advantage. And then the second school is Baltimore School of Design, and they are in partnership with MICA, Maryland Institute College of Art. And they focus on things like fashion design, graphic design, any of the interior design. So if you're, this is probably a school that I wish I had growing up, because I definitely would have gone. But this school also requires you to have a portfolio review. Their deadline is not over. They have a rolling admissions, which means you can always reach out to them to see if they have slots available. But those are your two schools that are really focused on the arts. Then you have the charter schools. These are schools that are public schools, but they may have a little more what's called autonomy in order for them to make certain decisions, or they may have a specialized area within their school. So those would be City Neighbors, which is really a very community-based schools focused on really the humanities. You have Green Street Academy. Their focus is very high on STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math. Coppin Academy's focus, I know they're very much college prep, but they also have a great health program as well. And that's on Coppin Academy's campus. So for those schools, there is and I'm sorry, that's a typo. There's not an audition or portfolio review. For those schools, you're going to fill out an application, which I'll talk about momentarily. And if they have, they bring in new ninth graders every single year. So for most charter schools, it's a lottery process. So if there are, let's just say 200 seats, but 300 applicants, if they have more applicants than seats, they'll do a lottery. So if that is one of your choices and you want to make sure that you put your charter schools down in the order in which you would like for your child to attend, to make sure that you are eligible to enter the lottery. Because if it's not on the sheet, you will not be entered for the lottery. And then last but not least, you have your public schools with no criteria. So those are schools such as ACE, again, Green Street, although it's a charter school, is also a public school with no criteria, the same as Coppin. Mervo and Carver also don't have any requirements now. They used to, but now they do not. And they are really focused on technology, in addition to some P-Tech programs, in addition to like culinary arts and other programs that are really focused around career-centered programs. Trying to think specifically. So you have your auto mechanic, a lot of your trades, but they don't call them trades anymore. I'm just trying to come up with the language that they use now, but what we used to call trades are the services that are provided at Mervo and Carver. Right. All right, this is what the Baltimore City High School application looks like. And it's pretty self-explanatory for the first part. You're basically filling out your information. There's a section there that talks about your pupil ID. You all will, if you're transferring from a private school, you will not have that. So you just leave that blank. Same thing for your school number. You will not have a school number, but on the line, please write in like private and something that will definitely stand out so that they know that you're applying from a private school. Here is where you will enter the selections for the schools that you would like. Again, all of the questions that Valerie just shared for your private schools, you must ask those same questions of the public schools. Very important, because you may be used, and I'm not saying that public schools is a better or worse choice. It is a choice. So it's really important for you to do your research to make sure that that is the type of environment that you want your child to attend. So you will put these in order in terms of your preference. So whatever you put down for number one is the one you really, really, really want to go to. All right. If there is a CTE track, so for example, if your number one school was Mervo and they have CTE, that's the term I was looking for, career technology. If that is the area that you're looking for, then you're going to, in that line, you're going to put in that area. So if you're going to Mervo and you really want to study mechanics, you would put mechanics on that line. Or if you're going to Carver and you wouldn't want to study culinary arts, you would put culinary arts on that line. So make sure if it has a certain track for you to choose in the 9th grade, you would choose that track here. If it does not have a track, you would just put them in order based on number one all the way down to the one that you want to attend, but is probably the lowest in your list. And then your parent will sign it and you will sign it. On the right, you'll see these are the areas that they're going to be looking at. So your 8th grade private school report card, you need to make sure that you are entering the numerical values for your English, math, science, and social study classes. Then you want to make sure you're entering your first quarter 8th grade, final grades for 2021, and then first quarter for 21-22, because these applications are actually not due until January 21st, I believe. So you'll probably get another report card before then. Again, every school is different. Some operate on trimesters, some operate on quarters. So you want to make sure that you check in with your school to make sure that the dates line up. And then in terms of test data, again, I'm not sure if any private schools have given any standardized tests this year, but for the most part, the city schools have not. So therefore, you would pretty much leave that blank unless your school took like an iReady test, or again, I'm not sure what tests are given to private school students, but that's where that data would go. This year, I was trying to find someone in Baltimore City Schools to answer this question for me. So if you are interested, I highly encourage you to follow up with, I'm going to give you an email and a phone number. Or in my experience, it's best to go to North Avenue and ask your question. I do not believe they are administering the iReady test. In the past, that was a test that would pretty much determine what your level would be if you're transferring from a private school to a public school. Again, because of the pandemic, I don't know if they waived that. That was the question that I really wanted to find out for you all tonight, and I was not able to. So please make sure you ask that question to make sure that you're not missing any of the things that you're going to need in order to apply. But everything else in terms of the application itself, you'll get that this evening. All right, so here are just some things that I was able to gather from North Ave regarding the non-Baltimore City residents or students. So one, you may use the application, and you all will have a copy of that application tonight. If you're applying to a school with entry criteria, which is basically your city, your Weston, your Poly, your Dunbar, your Bard, you have to complete the section 2 of the form. So section 2, again, pretty much all of your grades need to be entered in a numerical fashion. And again, if you have iReady diagnostic results, you can submit those. If you did not, I highly recommend for you to call this number, the 410-396-8600, and contact the Office of Achievement and Accountability and ask them if your child will need to take the iReady test. If they do, it's being offered on certain dates. So that's how it was in the past. Again, I'm not quite sure how they're handling it this year. So it's really important for you to follow up with that. And then last but not least, these are some things that you all are going to need. Your copies of your report cards, birth certificate, address documentation, and those things must be attached to your application form and submitted to, the information is here, North Avenue, room 106, by January 21st. It's really important that you get those things in by the deadline, because if not, for those schools that you selected, especially if it's a lottery, if your application is not entered, then you will not be able to attend that school, or it decreases your chances of getting into that particular school. So it's really important that you get everything in by the deadline. In terms of research, this is a tool that could be very helpful to you, because Baltimore City no longer has the high school fair in person. It was all done virtually. So since you don't have the opportunity to kind of see all the schools at once and meet principals and meet students and teachers, this is another online resource. So you'll go to baltimoreCitySchools.org/schools, and you can actually go in and look at the school profile for every single school. You can choose by charter, you could choose by program, you could choose by new school initiative, you could choose by criteria schools. So once you're on this page, you would click on any of these schools and it would give you their profile. You can see things such as their graduation rate. You may see things such as their attendance rate, anything that is really important to you. So again, the things that Valerie mentioned, is really important to find out what their graduation rate is, right? And then how many years in a row have they maintained that graduation rate? Where are their students attending college or post-secondary opportunities? What is the culture and climate like? That's extremely important. You might be able to read about discipline data or their suspension data, but it's another thing to actually show up and get a sense for the feel of the school. So data is great, but I highly encourage you, if you have the time, to actually go to the school. And no principal worth their weight in gold is going to say you're not allowed to take a visit or you're not allowed to come into the school. Like if they say that, definitely a red flag, and you probably don't want to go there. So I encourage you, some of the schools may still have open houses via Zoom or in person. So once you figure out which ones you would like to explore, I would highly encourage you to reach out to those schools to see if they have something coming up, or they may have a pre-recorded Zoom that you could watch as well. So that brings me to the high school fair. So this is the live version has passed, but if you go to Baltimore City Schools and click on that link for the high school fair, there is a pre-recorded Zoom of the high school fair, right? Because that was on December 3rd. That's the virtual platform. That's when it launched, but you can constantly watch the high school fair because it is online now. Again, just to reiterate, the deadline is January 21st. Applications are due on that date. And again, I highly recommend that you reach out to, here is the email, the direct email, or 396-8600. There is one other email that I'm going to put into the chat for you, and that is Dominic Bivens. And he is in charge of school placement. So I am going to put that in the chat. Let's see here. And while I'm doing that, feel free to unmute if you have any questions that I can answer for you. And I will be very honest, I'm a little rusty. I have not done this work in quite a few years, but I am connected with many guidance counselors throughout Baltimore City that have given me some updates on what's happening with the process. Are there any questions about the high school process for Baltimore City Schools?
Anyone feel free to put your questions in chat too, if you'd rather not unmute and chime in. But thanks, Jamila. That was really helpful. And boy, it strikes me how much this process has changed because of COVID. And we had some similar information come our way. So I really appreciate these updates. And Valerie, your presentation as well. So I'll give it a moment if anybody wants to ask questions. I've also put into the chat during Jamila's presentation some of the resources, the phone number, the email. Jamila's just added the email, the place that you can go to look at the comparative school data, which is amazing how much data is there and available. So if we don't have any questions, I'm going to ask Kirby to speak next about financial aid.
All right, good evening, everybody. I know that you've heard so much information today, and it can kind of be overwhelming. So again, if you have any questions at any point during any of our presentations or after, definitely do not hesitate to ask. So we're going to switch back to private school. And Valerie gave an amazing overview, so thank you very much. So I don't have to talk as long. Because you hit so many different things when thinking about what school do you want to go to, but we're going to specifically talk about cost, because while we do need to be practical and realistic and also understand what's best for our scholar, you also need to think about how you're going to be able to afford whatever school you want your scholar to go to. So when parents are making such a big investment, and it is an investment, and I commend all parents who are able to send their children to Catholic or religious affiliated or private schools, you're talking about spending $15,000, $16,000, $30,000, $35,000 a year for education. So I definitely commend you. And there are a lot of resources. I know that that number is frightening, and it's a large number, and you are, again, making an investment. So a part of the process when you are applying, I know we only talked about that for a little bit, but when you are submitting your application to your private schools, make sure that you're asking about their financial aid process. Many schools use the system FACTS, F as in Frank, A as in Apple, C as in cat, T as in Tom, S as in Sam, facts. And that is where you're going to go and upload your household income. They're going to ask about your taxes. They're going to ask to see W-2s. They're going to ask to see clarifying and identifying information for your household to determine how much money you're going to be able to receive in financial aid. This is also something that you can talk to your admission counselors at the schools about. They will know these stats. That's a part of their job, to understand and be able to tell parents and families how much money does the school normally give in financial aid. And of course, that ebbs and flows depending on how much money they have to allocate to different families. So make sure you fill out that application. It's important, of course, to fill out your application to get into the school, but also fill out that FACTS application so you can see how much money you're able to qualify for. So let's just say, to keep the math really simple, a school costs $20,000 a year. When you're submitting and uploading your information through the FACTS system, let's say you are able to get $10,000, you receive that in financial aid. That means that we're subtracting the 10 from the 20, which means that your family is coming up with another $10,000 for the tuition. Now, again, like Valerie said, that's just tuition, that's not fees. So as you're looking at your finances and making sure that you understand what does my monthly bill look like? What is that breakdown? How can I pay? Because some schools give you options where you can just pay it all at once. Other schools allow you to have a payment plan in 2 chunks. So that 10,000 becomes 5,000 in A month and then 5,000 in C month. And then other schools, which a lot of parents do, a lot of parents that I work with in previous institutions, they chose to do a 10-month plan, which is breaking that now remaining $10,000 into 10 months. And the schools will put out their schedule. They make these decisions. So again, make sure that you're advocating not only for yourself, but also for your scholars and for your family, and thinking, how does this fit into your monthly budget? Most schools allow you to go right on to the website and pay your bill. A lot of schools actually use a third-party system, and that's where you're paying your tuition. You can set it up automatically that it just kind of rolls out of your account. And I know a lot of parents did that. That's probably what I would do if I was a parent, like just let it come on out. I don't even want to see you take this tuition money out of my bank account, but there are the options that you have. So financial aid is one thing. And some parents may say, well, Kirby, I make X amount of dollars. I don't know if I'm going to qualify. I say apply anyway, because you don't know. You don't know until you know. So definitely still apply for FACTS, and the school is going to let you know if you've received financial aid. So when you are accepted into a private school, when you get your application, they're going to show you what you've qualified for, be it financial aid, be it scholarship opportunity, whether they're merit-based scholarships, whether they're scholarships based on you being an artist or an athlete or a musician. So schools have, in addition to financial aid, they also receive money for scholarships. Again, this is something that you're going to want to talk to your admission counselors about to see if there are programs that your scholar is able to apply for. So again, some programs might be merit-based, meaning they're looking at academics or community service or advocacy or extracurricular activities. And then other things, again, might be based on extracurricular activities, sports, art. There might be an audition component. That's something that you might have to do if you are applying for a musician scholarship, an art scholarship. So again, make sure that you're building relationships with your admission counselors at these high schools, and that's for public or private. Build the relationships, and that's something that you need to take no matter where you go, no matter what you do. A lot of things in life is about relationships, not what you know, it's who you know. Remember that, remember that, remember that. So as you're advocating for yourself and for your child, just look into it. The websites, all the schools' websites are going to have all this information. They're going to tell you what scholarships you can apply for. They're going to tell you what their requirements are. They too have deadlines, so you need to have your application in and make sure that you're submitting your scholarship applications as well, because sometimes it's a separate essay or it might be an audition. So you want to make sure as you're having that checklist that you're also having a section that you're filling out what are the requirements for these scholarships. Something that I also like to tell parents to look at, because some jobs actually assist with tuition. And for some jobs, they might assist with secondary, high school, and college. So definitely talk to your HR department as well to see if there are ways that they are able to help offset the pay. I know Johns Hopkins have different programs. If you work for Hopkins, the police, like the fraternal police, like they have different programs, and then some HR programs, private or public institutions also help defer the cost of education. So ask. The worst thing they can tell you is no, but at least you asked the question. I know I kind of went through that quickly, but again, I wanted to make sure that we know that we're advocating for ourselves and for our young people, filling out our application on time, filling out the FACTS application. There is a fee. There's a processing fee for FACTS. I think it's about $35 or $40. So just keep that in mind. That's another fee, those hidden fees that we touched on earlier. You do have to pay for them to upload that information. And again, that's if you are applying for financial aid. If you're just applying for a scholarship, it's probably just the application fee itself, not a separate fee for the scholarship. So keep that in mind. Make sure you add all of those things on your budget. Are there any questions about money?
Kirby, I just wanted to add, thank you so much. I really
You're
think that
welcome.
that's so important at the next level. Children's Scholarship Fund, as you all know, covers K through 8, but a program that's also continuing to operate in the state of Maryland called Boost, B-O-O-S-T, is also supporting tuition in high school. So if you're currently receiving Boost funding as a CSFB scholar family, or if you're, if you're not, also look into the application for Boost funding for high school. We don't know how long that funding is going to continue, but it's there and it's substantial if you qualify for it. So don't forget to look at that as well. Other questions people have for Kirby about funding private school, high school? Okay, I'm going to go ahead then and open up the floor for questions for our students. As Valerie and Jamila and Kirby all mentioned, it's so important to include your students at this juncture. I remember dealing with my own kids in middle school, and it wasn't about including them. It was like, yes, we are deciding where we're going to high school. And I'm like, really? Okay, I'm glad you told me that. And, they were certainly part of the process, and maybe not as big of the part of the process as they thought, but they were part of the process. So if you're on the phone and with us tonight and you're a student and you'd like to ask our students, Varia and Hope, about their experience selecting their high school along with the help of their parents, please put your questions in the chat or unmute yourself and ask them questions. Okay, Gabby, did you want to chime in and ask one of our student panelists a question this evening?
Sure, thank you so much. These presentations have been so great. We hear a lot about making sure that the school that you are considering is the best for your kid. So for the students, I want to know, what are the top 3 things that you think you as a student and parents should consider when you're looking for the best high school for you? Like, what do you remember what you were looking for or what you wished you were looking for?
I can speak first on this. I'm Varia. I'm a senior at Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. And for me, it was mainly because I did apply to some Catholic high schools in city also, but I just felt like Poly was a better fit for me because I wanted to be in a more diverse environment. And also it was just easier trying to make new friends and stuff because all my old classmates were going to city. And I wanted something different, and I am really good at science and math, and I actually enjoy doing that. So that was one thing. That was the diversity, being able to meet new people, and the last thing, it would probably, that thing. That's about it. I can't really think of a third thing at the moment. It's just I thought that was a really good fit for me personally. So.
Thanks, Varia.
Thank
Hope,
you.
would you like to chime in too about the 3 things that you thought that you wanted to consider, that you considered when you chose city?
Um, one of the top 3 things I considered going to city. I actually didn't apply to city first. Well, first I gotta introduce myself. My name is Hope Sanders. I'm a sophomore at Baltimore City College. And 3 of the things I considered was, I wanted to first apply to the Baltimore School for the Arts. And when I did, I sadly got rejected. But before I actually got the letter that I was going to be rejected, I wanted to go because I liked art and I still love it. And I wanted to go to learn French as well, to continue my studies in French, since my middle school only taught Spanish. And so when I found out that Baltimore City School for the Arts did not have that, I totally did not want to go anymore. And I was like, I want to apply somewhere else. And city was the second place I wanted to go. And when I applied to city, it was the best choice I think I've ever made because I feel as though it fits me academically, and it prepares me for college. And I think that when you are thinking of things that you should be thinking of putting your child in high school is if it has the things that they need, is that if it will help will prepare them for college and just their life in general, and if they will love it and have fun. But one thing I do say that you should also, well, I would say don't go to high school for your friends. When I went, me and my friends, we was like, we didn't even have that whole problem. Don't go to school for your friends. Go to school because you want to go to that school, not because of anyone else. So, but those were the top three things that I considered.
I got to tell you both how courageous I think it is that you both didn't put friends at the forefront of your decision. That's a really mature thing to do. Really, I got to say that's amazing because it is such a big decision, and a lot of people base it on their friends. And the rest of your life is not going to be dictated by what your friends do, especially if you have your own interests and your own path. So really, really a courageous thing. I think that you both did in that regard, and that answer surprised me, but thank you. That was great. Anybody else want to ask our panelists a question? I'm going to chime in then and ask you both if there's one thing you could change that you did in middle school to be better prepared for high school, what would it be? And we'll go backwards. Hope, I'm going to call you out on that one first.
I can't really think of one thing I could change. I think Patterson Park really prepared me for high school, especially city. And it gave us we had wonderful teachers, and we had tests and web tests that prepared us and to see where we could be. I don't know. I would say I don't know if I could say this, but I would say continue doing well in your studies. And like I was in honors for 2 years, and 1 year I didn't really go to honors, but I had to fight for it. And if you think you deserve to be somewhere, you fight for it. It's like if you want to go to a really top high school, you fight for that high school. My composite score was 700 and above. You fight for a good composite score so you can get into those top tier high schools. And yes, and I'm also prepared. And I also did 1 year of college. It also prepared me for college. So I'm already ahead of high school. But yeah, that's really the only thing I could think of.
Okay, well, I totally agree with what you said because honestly, for me, since I similar to how Hope had, I didn't get into poly at first. I didn't get into actually neither about city or poly at first, but then I got into city and then I got waitlisted for poly and then I got into poly. So that was something that really changed things. And then when I got there, I realized because I was in algebra 1 for my math in 8th grade, that did not prepare me for the math that I was going to take in high school. So I think that would probably what I would change about that, just like certain classes, because private school classes are way different than public school, how they run things. So it all depends on the school you go to. So that's probably it. I just like feel a little bit more prepared, like with certain classes, because I think I could have done way better in my freshman year of high school if I was properly prepared with more things. So yeah.
That's great. I think that you two are extraordinary young women, and you obviously are forging a path that is going to take you where you want to go, and that's exciting to see. I really just applaud you for that. Are there any other questions that anyone on our at our conference, at our seminar tonight wants to ask either in chat or out loud?
What was your favorite subject to help you with when you was in middle school to help you with high school? Hope.
Well, okay, so I had honors Spanish and honors algebra. So to get the, oh, I forgot what it's called, but okay, it credits. It's called credits. So I didn't even know that when you take honors algebra and if you take an honors class, well, I guess in my school, when you take if you take an honors language and an honors math class, that credit follows you to high school. And when I found that out, I was like, all right, got two extra credits, added on. And I love seeing it. Every time I get my report card, I just look over to the credit box and I just see that little 2 and I'm like, yeah, it was hard work. And it was hard work. It was a lot of hard work, but math, well, it wasn't really my favorite. I'm not really good at it, but when I did understand it, it did make me very helpful. And even though I don't really, that's why I kind of considered city. I didn't really want to learn Spanish as much as I used to wanted to learn. But I am glad that even though I still didn't continue learning Spanish, that it was still added on to my transcript. And so that would be the 2 subjects that I think was very necessary.
Vera?
So I think the subject that helped me prepare for like my high school course would probably be my science class in middle school, because during my middle school period, it was like a mix of everything. It wasn't like specifically chemistry, biology, and everything, because I did one of my better classes I did in my freshman year was biology 1, and it was honors too. And I was like, because I have all honors classes in my freshman year, like that's a requirement for every freshman. And it was just so cool that I was able to like catch on really fast about it, because I was kind of scared. Cause I was like, oh my gosh, all honors classes. But then I got through it and I was able to finish out the year strong. So I was happy about that. And it's still helpful now because I'm taking 3 science classes at the moment. So yeah, I would say my science class was the most helpful.
Great job, ladies. Great job.
Absolutely. Are there any questions or any concluding comments that anybody would like to make this evening? I have learned more tonight than I even knew before about high school choice. So excited that we had the group of panelists, and grateful to Jamila and Valerie for taking their time to really prepare and bring us all up to speed on the issues that are going on around high school choice right now. But any concluding comments, questions before we wrap it up?
I would just like to say that I am glad that this program is continues to be held. And I like that we have this ability to record, and so that others will be able to see it, that, because we have busy schedules, and we thank the students. So we have expanded. Now we're, have our panel of students that are willing to share, and we thank them for coming. Because that's not easy all the time, sharing yourself out here to the world. So we thank you. And this is important that we do this, and we learn each time, each time we do this. I learn more from Jamila's presentation, from Kirby's presentation. I learn more each time. And so, and we tweak it and make it different, because it's different from when we started 4 years ago than it is now. So it's always good. So I'm just glad that we continue to do this. So yes, that's my comment.
I guess my concluding comment would be to also thank the parents and students that came from Children's Scholarship Fund Baltimore and from our partner schools. Thank you for taking the time, because as Valerie just said, time is a precious commodity. We're all really busy. And the fact that you invested an hour and a half with us tonight to learn about how to make a thoughtful choice, about how to help your student position themselves to get into the school that they want, and some ideas shared from our students about what they could do and what they did to make that happen. I hope it was helpful to you, but we're really grateful to you for the time that you spent with us, and really appreciate it. So with that, I'm going to end the recording.